Okay, we are in the halachas, the laws of the Haftorah, the part that we read from the prophets after the reading of the Torah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, we're holding, I believe we're holding law number 4. So it says like this: Aser ledaber bisha shahamaftir koira es haftorah. So the Shulchan Aruch, the Kitzur, is calling the person who gets called up for the aliyah of the Haftorah and the Maftir. So when the Maftir means that person who's been called up for the Maftir and then to read the Haftorah, is when he reads the Haftorah and the Maftir reads the Haftorah, one should not be speaking. It's forbidden to speak. He says in footnote number 4, quotes the Shulchan Aruch 147.3. So sometimes people are, depending again, every shul has to work in according to its bylaws, but usually the shul's experienced shuls would try to give the haftorah to someone who could read it, or someone read it on his behalf, and to read it properly with it properly loud enough so everyone could listen. So they shouldn't be talking. But sometimes if there's someone reading it low and fast and anti-crowd, so maybe people will speak, and therefore he says in law number 4, one should not speak, refrain from talking. Again, so it's law number 5. Ikar hadin, sorry. Now here, this is the question that how does it work in different synagogues? Who's the one who actually says the Haftorah? Means the Haftorah is not read in most shuls out of a scroll. It's read out of a book. Not like the Torah. Even the places that they do read out of a scroll, it's a scroll for the Nevi'im, for the prophets. It's not the same sanctity as the Torah scroll. So who's actually reading the Haftorah? Some shuls have the custom that the one who has Maftir will read the blessings, and then he says the Haftorah low, and everyone says it low with him. Everyone says it like privately. He just says the blessings. So he says, Ikar Hadin, the basic law is, that the one who goes up for the Maftir makes the blessings, the one who was called up for the aliyah of the Haftorah, he's the one who says the Haftorah. And the crowd, the community, they shouldn't say it only in unison, together, but everyone else should say it quietly, not in a way that disrupts others. This custom, that everyone says it loud in their own, like a loud halal or something. Even Maftir, the person who's saying the Maftir, the person who's saying the Haftarah, the one who's called the Maftir, it's coming from a lack of knowledge that they're doing that. It means it's not the way to do it, that everyone should say the Haftarah loud with the Maftir, means the person who was called up to read the Haftarah, but the person who gets the Haftarah, the Maftir, who reads that, he reads the Haftarah, and others could read along quietly. It's best to nullify this custom. There's another custom that people may have. That it's not in, they say it slowly. They're not saying it in a proper pace. So he says there's some people who say the Haftarah so slowly that even after the Maftir ends the Haftarah and begins the brachas, they do not want to stop saying the Haftarah because they're saying it slowly. Let's say the person who has the Aliyah was saying it faster and you're saying it slower. It's not good what they're doing. If they're saying it loudly, so they're not hearing everything because they're saying it slowly and they're not hearing what the person who said it. In the blessings, right? The person is saying the blessings after the Haftarah, and you're reading it slowly, loudly, you can't hear what the person's making the blessings after the Haftarah. And sometimes, another thing is they disrupt others. If others are trying to listen to the blessings after the Haftarah, and they're saying the Haftarah to themselves in a higher voice, they're not only not listening themselves to the blessings, they're also disrupting others from listening to the blessings. V'af im manichim koilem ktsas betchilas habrachas. Sorry. V'af im manmichim koilem ktsas betchilas habrachas. And even if they say they lower their voice when the one starts saying the blessings, so they're not to be disruptive. They can't listen because they're reading. So basically, he's talking about people who read along, but read slower than the maftir, than the person who's saying the haftarah. Again, in these situations, it's best that the person who's saying the haftarah also shouldn't just rattle it off. Some people read Hebrew very fast. They shouldn't just read it very fast, and that way disrupt others. Not allow others to keep up. So basically, the maftir should say that at a decent pace. The people who are saying it quietly along, again, don't say it loudly, quietly, should not say it too slow, because then they're not going to listen to the blessings. And if they're saying it loud, they're going to disrupt others. Even if they say it lower, they themselves are not going to listen to the blessings afterwards. Therefore, he says the conclusion is, what should be the custom? As soon as, no matter where you're holding, let's say it's a long haftarah. What does it make a difference if it's long or not? Let's say no matter where the haftarah, you're holding in the haftarah, when the maftir, again, that's the person who's reading the haftarah, finishes the haftarah, umaschal brachas, and starts the blessing, even though you yourself have not completed saying the haftarah. Alf bishu adayin leisim, even if you haven't finished. Yeh masin b'shtika, be quiet. Until he finishes the blessings, then you could then you could continue saying the haftarah. Means you don't have to. You could say it afterwards. But when the blessings start, when the person who has the haftarah starts saying the blessings after haftarah, you have to be quiet. A, you're going to disrupt others. B, you're not going to listen to the blessings. And then just finish this law, and then we'll get to Aaron's question. And now he adds, "Got my maftir yizar shlo yilahaschel b'mirsa brachas ad sheyifsa kol hamoin harav legamrei." And also, the person who has the haftarah, who's saying the haftarah, the maftir we call him, should not start saying the blessings afterwards until everyone's quiet, so everyone can hear the blessings. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, so I kind of understand what you said, but I've never seen it in action because, okay, so my shul, the guy who reads the Haftorah reads it out of a book. He comes up, he says the blessings. Everyone says it with him at the same pace, whatever. I mean, I don't know each individual person.
Everyone, people say it loudly with a
I don't
voice.
know. No, they just say amen at the end.
Oh, amen. Okay.
Right, and then when he reads the Haftorah, he reads it. Basically, he's reading at the same pace that he would have read the Torah portion. I mean, the two people who read are two different people, so it's not exactly the same. It's the same portion, and then the people who are reading along with him, usually everyone finishes roughly the same time. Some people may be a sentence or two behind because they're just slow readers, not because they're trying to read it slow. But we try to follow. Most people are following what he says word for word. Who knows the Hebrew well? And then even when I go to the Sephardic shul, wherever they read it from, depending on their tradition, still they read at the same pace as they read the Torah. So I've never seen any other pace.
No, so I'm saying you have sometimes people get called up, they read it fast. So he's saying they should read it at a good pace. Same time, if you're reading along, don't read with a voice so that you disrupt others. And if for whatever reason you're reading it slower than the person, the maftir they call him, the person who's reading the haftarah. And when he finishes, first of all, he should wait till he should make sure everyone's quiet. But if you haven't finished yet, stop reading, listen to the blessings, and then you could continue reading afterwards. That's the bottom line.
Okay, so now the second question is that you mentioned when we're reading the Torah, because I used to read ahead because I'm also reading the English. So I just keep reading, and then when I finish the whole thing, he's still in whatever portion. Okay, so now I'm more in tune with him. But wouldn't you be the same with the Haftorah? Why would you go at a different pace? You read.
The main concern is, even if a person wants to read it, he says the custom is that the person who's reading is called the Maftir. So his name is the Maftir. Let's give him that title. He's the title of the Maftir. The Maftir person reads the Haftarah. He should read it at a normal pace, loud, and make sure there's no noise when he makes the blessings so that everyone can hear the blessings. The crowd, the kahal, the community, the congregation that's listening, some people just will listen and follow along. Some people, if you want to read it with him, that's okay to read it along quietly, not to disrupt others, A. And B, if for whatever reason they finish before you and he finishes before you and starts to make the after blessings, stop what you're reading Let him make the blessings, listen to the blessings, and of course, don't disrupt others from listening to the blessings. Don't be talking, and even if the talking is number one, make sure you don't talk. Number two is even if you're just reading the Haftarah, don't be disruptive, and yourself should pay attention to the readings, the readings of the blessing. But the point of this law number 5 is A, not to be disruptive, means read it quietly. B, you have to pay attention to the blessings. Yes, Barbara.
So is the last verse of the Torah reading is called the Maftir. So it's the same person who reads that, the person who reads the Haftorah?
Yeah, well, it depends in the synagogue. You have to remember, one of the things, this is a custom by most bar mitzvah boys today, is a bar mitzvah boy today will either, there's different levels of how the bar mitzvah boy celebrates his bar mitzvah. Others will read the entire portion of the Torah of their bar mitzvah, like I did when I was younger. There's others that will read one aliyah, and there's others that will read one aliyah and the Maftir, means the Haftarah. So a lot of boys today learn the Haftarah. That's they do that in a lot of shuls. Not everyone does it now. On a regular Shabbos, to get called up for your Haftarah, you have to know how to read it. There's A, you have to be a person who could read Hebrew properly, and B, you have to be able to read it with the notes. There's notes for the Haftarah. Not everyone knows these notes, and sometimes, so in certain shuls, they will only call up people, and you give the person notice that they will have the Haftarah, so they should prepare with the notes. Other synagogues, and Israel has this custom, they have the reader. It means even the person who gets called up for Maftir will make the blessings, stand next to by the bima, by the table, will stand next to another person who will read the Haftarah for them. But the blessings will be made by the Maftir person.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I see more in Israel than I've seen in the States, where someone will read the Haftarah on behalf of someone else. But that's fine. But usually in the United States, at least what I've seen around the United States, is they'll only call people who can read it. Okay. So in footnote number 5, as he says, this paragraph is quoted by the Shar Ephraim, the idea that the Haftarah should be just read by the Maftir person, or the person who's reading it on his behalf. He says over here, and the congregation should repeat after him quietly. So he says, according to the Magen Avram 284, this applies only if he reads it from a chumash, meaning if the person is reading the Haftarah from, like I said, a book. But if he reads it from a Navi scroll, like I said, an Eretz scroll, a lot of the shuls, not my shul, but other shuls that I've seen, Ashkenazi shuls specifically, have scrolls for Navi, for the Haftarah. That means they have a scroll for each Haftarah on parchment. Then because of the sanctity of the book, it's not just a chumash, it's a scroll, the congregation should just listen. So here he says, the Magen Avram says, makes a difference. If it's being read out of a chumash, then you can read quietly because you're also reading it out of a chumash. But if it's being read out of a scroll and you're reading out of a chumash, so then be quiet and just listen to the reading out of the scroll. Footnote number 7 is on the laws of stems only from ignorance, the idea that people read loud, and it should be abolished. He says, see Magen Avram. Again, the Magen Avram is one of the halachic authorities on the Shulchan Aruch. So see Magen Avram, that if everyone reads aloud, the bracha of the Maftir is in vain. That Magen Avram goes as far to say that if everyone's going to read aloud, then the whole blessing was a wasted blessing. For the repetition, for the rationale of of other customs, see Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer talks about why people do it. Okay, one has to look at the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer was also an authority on halacha, who lived in Hungary about the time of the Baal Shem Tov. Okay, so that is 7. Is there an 8? No, 8's next law. Okay, law number 6. The Shabbos shtei parshis mechubaris. Okay, we had this the past 2 weeks. When you have a Shabbos that has 2 parshas, we had 2 weeks ago Tazria Mitzora, and we had last week Achrei Mos Kedoshim. So the question obviously is, what Haftorah do you read? There's 2 Haftorahs. We only read one. Which one do you choose? The first parsha or the second parsha? So he says, Shabbos shnei parshas mechubaris, when you have 2 parshas together. Maftir and B'Haftarah Shel Parsha Shniya. We read the second Haftarah. Aside, for those who paid attention last week, B'Achrei Kedoshim. Last week so the times we can read together are, if I'm not mistaken, we have Vayakal B'Kudei. I think this year we're separate. Tazri Mitzora, Achrei Mois Kedoshim, Bahar Bechukosai, Chukas Balak, and Matis Mase. So there's 6 weeks that could have 2 parshas together. I don't believe there's ever 6 weeks in one year because it's just in the case of a leap year. So you can't have leap years only 4 weeks, but there's 6 opportunities to join parshas, and there's a lot of calculations of how they do it based on the calendar. You always want to have Bamidbar read before Shavuos and Tzav read before Pesach. Yes, Aaron.
Anytime, I might have heard this wrong, so bear with it. But in America, we'll read 2 portions so that we are in line with Israel.
No, there's sometimes what could happen is, good point. Sometimes what could happen is that the final day of either Shavuos, I think it could happen also, or Pesach, will fall out on a Shabbos. So let's say it's very not very common, but it can happen that the 8th day of Pesach in Chutz La'aretz, meaning outside of Eretz Yisrael, not just America, outside of Eretz Yisrael, any place outside Eretz Yisrael, will be on a Shabbos. And in Eretz Yisrael, it will be the day after Yom Tif, which is also Shabbos, but it's not Yom Tif. In Chutz La'aretz, meaning any place out of Eretz Yisrael, on that Shabbos, they will read the reading and the Haftorah all for the holiday. In Eretz Yisrael, they're going to read the reading for Shabbos. And that's when you have a situation where Eretz Yisrael is going to be a week ahead of outside of Eretz Yisrael. Where, let's say, Eretz Yisrael, on the final day of holiday, they read the Parsha. So the next week, they read the next Parsha. And in America, they're catching up. We have that problem all the time. And the concern is that when people come from outside of Eretz Yisrael in these weeks until they catch up, when there's a united Parsha, it's complicated because in the synagogue, we're reading what you call the next week's Parsha, and they want to hear last week's Parsha. So there's different rulings. Rabbi Steinsaltz, who we learned his Talmud, the very famous Rabbi Steinsaltz, Even Yisrael, he was the Rav of our shul. He would not allow for a second reading in the synagogue, or even when some people would like very fast to read the first Parsha and go all the way to the next Parsha, he did not allow it. But and he was even reluctant to allow them to take a Sefer Torah outside and read a separate reading. But that sometimes they still do. They do a separate reading in another room. But yeah, that does happen. And the other opportunity for that to happen is on Shavuos. Shavuos is again a 2-day holiday. So Shavuos could fall out on Friday Shabbos. So in outside of Eretz Yisrael, Shabbos would be the 2nd day Yom Tif, and therefore they wouldn't read the Parsha until the next week, let's say Baloscha. And in Eretz Yisrael, that would be Shabbos, and therefore they would read regular Shabbos, and then they would lose again. It would be 1 week ahead. Okay. So what do you do about the Maftir, the Haftorah? What Haftorah do you read when there's a 2 parsha week? So he says like this: B'Shabbos shishtei parshas mechubaris. When you have 2 parshas together, Maftir and B'Haftorah shel parsha shniya, we read the second Haftorah. Levad. There's one exception to that rule, which was last week. B'Achrei Kedoshim. Last week, and those who paid attention, we did not read the second Haftorah, which would be the Haftorah for Kedoshim. We read the Haftorah for Achrei. Shem Mechubaris. Sha'az Maftirin Haloi Kibnei Chushim. We read the Haftorah that starts off with the verse Halo Bnei Chevushim. And he says, I think, where does it say? It's Amos, yes. B'Ktsas Chumashim Nishim the Parshas Vayishlach. Other Parshas have written, certain Chumashim have written that on Parshas Vayishlach, which is in the beginning of the year, Haftarah Vayivrach Yaakov, that Yaakov ran away, which is a prophecy. Vihitos, that's a mistake. Haftarah Zu Shachas, the Parshas Vayetze, that's supposed to be read in Vayetze. Haftarah Vayishlach Hu Chazayin Avadia. The Haftarah for Vayishlach is the vision of Avadia, okay, about the destruction of Edom. Again, there are still different customs. There's Nusach Ashkenaz, Nusach Sfard, there's what's called even Nusach Italia. Hey, Rebecca. And Shireen, there's also Nusach Chabad. Not everyone has the same Haftorah, and not everyone starts and finishes at the same place. There's different customs. So if you're holding one Chumash and you see something different happening in Shul, it could not be that. It doesn't mean it's a mistake. When it comes to Haftorahs, there's different customs. You'll see Chumash will say, this is Nusach Ashkenaz, this is Nusach Sfarad, this is Nusach Italian. There's different Nuschos, and different shows have different customs. But he's saying the general custom is that when there's two parshas, we read the second Haftorah, and when there's aside for last week that we read the first Haftorah. If I want to check in the Chumash, he says that Vayishlach is a mistake. So if I'm going to look at Vayishlach in the where it says Vayishlach, it's going to say, so it says by my Chumash that Minik Chabad, our minig is like it says in the Kitzur, Zeh Chazon Avadia.
In the art scroll, it says, this is where you start for Ashkenaz, this is where you start for Sephardic.
Exactly. So there's different places that you start, different places you finish, different verses that are added or omitted, etc.
But it comes from the same, it comes from Navi. So it all comes from the same story, so they're not changing anything. They're just not reading it all the same.
Just not reading it. Like, for instance, if you look at and in Parshas Vayetze, it has Sfardim. It says the Ashkenazim read Vayivrach Yaakov, like he says. And in it says the Sfardim and Chabad read Va'ami Tluim for Vayetze. So in Parshas Vayetze, which is again towards the beginning of the year, you'll be in different synagogues that have different customs of what's being read. Okay. Rosh Chodesh, let's see the footnotes on this.
Wait, just one quick thing. Does it mean
Sure.
any different from where they start? Or is it just, I mean, because it is part of Navi. So you're supposed to get a certain lesson from it. Are they trying to say that in one custom or another, one part means more, or what's the point? I mean, should we all read the same like the Torah?
Excellent point. But that's not the way it works. There's different customs. The reasoning behind the customs are obviously, some of them are understood, some of them are not understood. Some people will say, well, it's just a custom what they had in Sfard. I mean, you have to remember when it's not like today where there was, the Ashkenazim and Sephardim were two different communities based on kind of two different kind of the divisions that they had. Ashkenazim and Sephardim weren't so much a Jewish division as much as a national division. Sfard for many years was influenced by Muslim rule. Right? Only later in the Catholics kicked the Muslims back south towards Africa. But for I think the year 500 or 700, I forget what year it was, when the Muslims came up from the Straits of Gibraltar into Spain, and Spain was under the Moors, was under the Sephardi community, it's under the Arab communities or the Muslim communities, and therefore the Jewish communities of Spain were connected to the Jewish communities of North Africa all the way to Babylonia under the rule of the Muslims. The north of Europe, which is Germany, France, was always under Catholic and Christian rule. So that division of the national division or religious division amongst the nations ended up causing a division also within the Jewish people of different customs, different traditions, different types of study because of the split. And you could say you could theorize it about it, just a practical difference, but you're right, there is a much deeper meaning to it, not necessarily something that we all understand. Okay, Rosh Chodesh Shecholius v'Shabbos. What happens, and this happens often, what happens if Rosh Chodesh means the new month is on the Shabbos itself, falls out on Shabbos? Could happen. So what Haftorah do you say then? We don't say the Haftorah of the week. Maftir Hashemayim Kisi, that's a special Haftorah that is for the honor of the new month. What's unique about Shabbos Rosh Chodesh is a lot of the times the day itself requires a Haftorah. Meaning to say that a lot of times the day itself requires a Haftorah. Let's say holidays itself qualifies for Haftorah. There are certain days that if it was in the week, there is no Haftorah. There's no Haftorah for Rosh Chodesh in the week. However, if it's Shabbos, we read the Haftarah for Rosh Chodesh because even though on Haftarah, the Rosh Chodesh itself is not a day that will give up. We do read the Torah on Rosh Chodesh, but we don't have a Haftarah on Rosh Chodesh. So even though the Haftarah is only on a Shabbos, but the Haftarah has either a connection to the week, meaning the parsha of the week, or the message of the day of the week, of that day, which is Rosh Chodesh in our case, and therefore we're going to read about Rosh Chodesh, even though Rosh Chodesh itself doesn't demand a Haftarah, unless it falls on Shabbos. But he answers, what happens, V'im Tav, if you made a mistake? This happens all the time. Bikara Haftarah Shal Parshas Shvu, and you read the wrong Haftarah, you read the Haftarah of the week, of the parsha, not the Haftarah of Rosh Chodesh, which is starting with the verse, Hashemayim Kisi, the heavens my chair. If you did not yet say the final blessings, the blessings after the Haftarah, so then finish after, I guess you finished the Haftarah of the Parsha, then Yom Ragam, say again afterwards the Haftarah for Rosh Chodesh Hashemayim Kisi. Basically, you're sandwiching in two haftarahs between the first blessings and the after blessings, and then you make the after blessings after you've finished Hashemayim Kisi. What happens if you've said the after blessings as well? And then you remembered, oops, we made a mistake. We were supposed to say Hashemayim Kisi, the haftarah for Rosh Chodesh. So then the law is Yom Hashemayim Kisi b'lei brachas. Say the haftarah without the blessings. So the blessings had already been made on the haftarah of the week. What happens, and this also happens often, if Rosh Chodesh is on Sunday, so Shabbos is the day before Rosh Chodesh. If Rosh Chodesh falls out, the new month falls out on a Sunday. So we have a special Haftarah on the Shabbos prior to Rosh Chodesh, and that's the Haftarah Machar Chodesh. Tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh. It's the famous Haftarah of the story of David and Yohanan, the story where David finds out from his friend Yohanan, his brother-in-law, that his father-in-law and the king, Shaul, wants to kill him. Okay. And what happens if you made a mistake and you did not read Machar Chodesh? You read the Haftarah of the week. Then the same laws we said that apply to the actual Haftarah of Rosh Chodesh, which is that if you remember before the after blessings, say both. And if you forget, if you only remember after the after blessings, then you just read it without the blessing. So the same law would apply with Machar Chodesh. What happens if you have three options? It's the Shabbos, it's Rosh Chodesh, but it's the first day of Rosh Chodesh. Tomorrow is also Rosh Chodesh. So what Haftarah do you read then? You could read either the Haftarah for the Shabbos, that already we said we don't do. So by which Haftarah for Rosh Chodesh do you read? Do we emphasize the day, that today is the day of Rosh Chodesh, or do we emphasize that today is also the day before tomorrow being Rosh Chodesh? So which one do we read? Do we read the Haftarah of Hashemayim Kisi or Machar Rosh Chodesh? So we read Hashemayim Kisi. However, the custom is that we add to that Haftarah the first and last verse of Machar Chodesh. And this could also be in the situation where you have a haftarah of Shabbos Chanukah. Shabbos Chanukah could fall out on Rosh Chodesh. So then also you have which haftarah do you read? Do you read the haftarah of Chanukah, or do you read the haftarah of Rosh Chodesh? You read the haftarah of Chanukah. Okay. Footnote number 11 is the source. The heavens are my throne. That's Isaiah. 12 is Machar Chodesh, is Samuel. Okay. Doesn't mention about, at least not yet, about Shabbos Chanukah. B'Shabbos Chol Hamoed Pesach. So here we have a Shabbos. It's not holiday, it's Chol, but it's Chol Hamoed. It's week and holiday. It's the Chol Hamoed of Shabbos. So Ein Maskim Brachas Haftarah Shel Pesach. This is a special, unique law for Pesach. That Shabbos of Chol Hamoed Pesach, we read the Haftarah, not of the week, we read the Haftarah of Pesach, but we don't mention Pesach in the blessings, like we would mention a holiday. Loi be'emtza v'loi be'chsim, we're not in the middle or the end. Mekadosh Yisrael v'azmanim, etc. Ella misayim Mekadosh Shabbos. Ava b'chol hamoed Sukkos, but in Sukkos, that falls out on Shabbos Chol Hamoed, that can happen as well. Kivin she'omer m'hal shalom gam cholik b'karbanis, because this is, we learn, okay, this is a quick side law. There's only Pesach is different than Sukkot. Sukkot, we make we say a full Hallel every day of Sukkot because there's different sacrifices. Each day is almost it's like its own holiday, and of course on Shmini Atzeres we make a Shechianu. Pesach we only make a Shechianu on the first or second day. We do not make a Shechianu on Shvisha Pesach because it's one long holiday. Shmini Atzeres is its own holiday, and therefore we make a Shechianu again when we light candles or Kiddush on Shmini Atzeres, but we don't make it on Shvisha Pesach. And also we only say half Hallel in Pesach. So because it, so to say the holiday of Pesach is different in how much we celebrate it than Sukkot, so therefore we don't mention in the Haftorah that it's Pesach, because in the Haftorah we have special parts that we add when it's a Shabbos or Shabbos holiday, or if it's just a holiday. So if it's, for instance, Shabbos Chol Hamoed Sukkot, we would finish off the Haftarah Mikadesh Yisrael, Mikadesh Shabbos Yisrael Vazmanim, that we're blessing Shabbos and the holiday. On Shabbos Chol Hamoed, we just say Mikadesh Shabbos without Yisrael Vazmanim. Okay, so that's the difference between Pesach and Sukkot. If one is going to pay attention to the blessings, which we just learned in the beginning, one should pay attention to the blessings. 13, 14. Okay, what is it saying about Chol Hamoed? So what is the difference between Chol Hamoed Sukkot and Chol Hamoed Pesach? What did I see before? Oh, that's just the festival of Sukkot. Okay, 14 is just the Pri Megadim says this. Okay, next. So law number 9. If a young boy a minor who's reached the age of chinuch, of education, and knows how to make a bracha properly, not just read the Hebrew, but understands what it means to make a blessing, and knows how to pronounce the words properly. So, this is a law that's not really practiced, that even a boy who's not yet bar mitzvah, but is educated enough to properly say the blessings and properly pronounce and know what is going on, is aware of what's happening. So you could call that person up for the final Aliyah, the Maftir, and Shabbos and Yom Tov. However, that doesn't apply to every Shabbos and Yom Tov, milvad, aside for Shabbos Zachar. Shabbos Zachar is the Shabbos before Purim, which is biblical. The Maftir is biblical to listen to. Or Parshas Para, the reading that we have after Purim, which is about the red heifer. Or Shabbos Shuvah, the Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Shabbos of repentance. That also it's not appropriate to call an underage a minor. Or V'chein b'Yom Tov Shrisha Pesach, or the 7th day Pesach, where the Haftorah is the Shira. The Shiras David. So again, it's not appropriate to call a minor then either. Noigim shein katan olam after, the custom is not to. So though this is not, basically what we're seeing is that the Haftarah doesn't have the same laws as the reading of the Torah itself. The Haftarah, again, the reason we read the Maftir, we read the Torah before the Haftarah, we said before, was to show that the Torah is more, is so to say, is on a higher level of sanctity than the Haftarah, but nevertheless, the actual Aliyah itself and the Haftarah is something, in theory, a minor could get the Aliyah, but there's certain weeks he should not get the Aliyah. Hold on, Aaron, let me just finish the law. Also, on the first day of Shavuos, the holiday of Shavuos is coming up in a few weeks. So the first day, which is a special Haftarah, we read about the Merkava of Yecheskel, the chariot of Yecheskel, which is again a very special and holy Haftarah. It's inappropriate for a minor to read it because it's above his pay grade. Not only do we don't call a minor, we don't just call anyone for that Haftarah, because again, the Merkava is something that's a very unique part of the Torah, and therefore it should be someone that is appropriate to read that Haftarah. Also the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, known as the Shabbos of the vision of Yeshaya. That's the time we're supposed to specifically give the rabbi of the synagogue that Aliyah, so says the Magen Avram, in law number in chapter number 262, law 12. Yes, Aaron.
Okay. So for Haftorah, I've never seen minors read it. But
Like I said, it's not a practice.
but
custom.
wait, but
Yeah.
in Torah, in the Sephardic shuls that I go to, I can't say for the ones I haven't gone to. The ones that I go to, they have Torah reading classes for the people who are around the age of learning. They're young. Okay, so anyways, they read it. They actually go up and they read that portion of the Torah. But then an adult comes up and rereads it.
In the synagogue during the actual Torah reading time?
In the morning, they have, okay, so they'll have learnings where they'll learn the Torah portion for the next week.
Is this a middle prayer?
What?
Is this during the prayer, the reading during the prayer time?
In the morning, no, wait, just hear me out. After Shabbos morning service is over, they might
Okay.
stay 15 minutes to half an hour learning to read the Torah. These kids are interested in reading the Torah. Maybe
Okay,
that will
that's
be
fine.
their thing. But to practice, so on Shabbos, on the real part of Torah reading, it's in a children's service though, but it's a father-son thing. So they go up, they read, and maybe more than one kid, and they read a portion of the Torah, but for every portion of the Torah that's read by a kid, and an adult the regular adult who reads the Torah rereads it.
Yeah, although I'm personally not familiar with this custom, I've never seen it before. I'm not saying it's not accurate, and I'm sure there's a halachic basis for this. This would only apply to a place I'm quite certain in a children's minyan. There are such things as children's minions. It's very popular today in America that people have children's minyan. I mean, they have a minyan that's
It's a
geared
father-son minyan.
father-son minyan, and people have taken it to extremes in certain places. So in that situation, the community, someone who attends such a minyan, knows in advance that you're attending a minyan that's focused on children.
But I will say
But
this.
in a regular, I can't. That wouldn't be allowed in a regular service where people come to pray because you're not allowed to disrupt
Okay,
the flow of
well, when
service.
I asked the rabbi, does it count? And why do they reread it? He says, the children are practicing. It doesn't count as the real reading. The real reading has to be done by someone who had a bar mitzvah.
Yeah, so my point, what I'm saying is that the disruption or the time consumed doing that is only allowed in a minyan where people who go to this minyan specifically know that this is a minyan geared towards children. But for a regular minyan, there's certain responsibilities the congregation has to the congregants, that you're not allowed to do things that are disruptive, that it's called Kehilchatah tzibura. Things that if a person comes in expecting that davening should take an hour, a half hour, whatever it is, and you're doing things that are disruptive, called Kehilchatah tzibura, because you decided either you didn't prepare the Torah right and you have to start rolling it, other things that are called Kehilchatah tzibura, that's a very strict law. That's like I said before, the reason why Rabbi Steinsaltz would not allow for someone to read the first parsha, let's say someone comes from Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, in a week after Shavuos, let's say, not this year, but in another year, where we're holding different parshas. So there's a guy who comes, there's a certain rabbi who comes to our synagogue in the old city, and he says, like, let me quickly, I'll read very fast the first aliyah, that's the old parsha. That's very fast, it's still 15, 20 minutes. It takes time to read, right? As fast as you read. That's called Kehilchatah tzibura. He says it's not allowed. You're disruptive for the regular congregants who live here, and they don't want to, they're not penciling in extra 20 minutes because you want to catch up. So that's, again, in a children's minyan, I would understand why there'd be those things would be allowed, but that's not allowed in a regular minyan because it's Kehilchatah tzibura. It's disruptive to the community. Okay. What does it mean? The age of chinuch means someone who's being trained in mitzvos. Chinuch means education. So 16, he says, he quotes the source for this, the Seches Megillas 22a. What are we talking about? Shabbos Shuva. So Shabbos Shuva, the Shabbos before, between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, it's not appropriate for a non-bar mitzvah boy to get that aliyah. Again, that's a custom. Usually, it doesn't mention it here, but usually the rabbi gets that aliyah. It says it's humiliating to the congregation to call a minor to admonish them, right? Because the Haftorah is Shuva Yisrael, do repentance. So, like you said, the Haftorah is something you're supposed to live with and study. And Shuva Yisrael, you have a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old saying, guys, do tshuva. That's inappropriate. The same applies to Shabbos Chazon when we talk about the destruction of the temple, the vision of Yeshaya about the destruction of the temple. It's inappropriate for a minor to be the one who's reading that. It should be a gadol, a rav, a person of stature. And 20 is the Shabbos before the fast of Tisha B'av is the time that the rabbi should get the aliyah. Again, most communities will also give that aliyah of Shabbos Shuvah to the rabbi. It says like this, final law of this chapter. The reading, Loi sikna kriyas haftarah im brachais, ella la'acher shekar b'torah b'brachais. Kol hakruim haruim. So here's the question is, if for whatever reason you either did not read the Torah with properly with the blessings before, whatever happened, but the Haftorah to be read with the blessings is dependent that you read the reading of the Torah with the blessings and completed it. If you didn't complete it for whatever reason, the Torah was not usable, was puzzle, or you didn't have a minyan, or you didn't have a Torah, whatever doesn't make a difference what the reason is. But if you didn't read the Torah first with the blessings, a person may think, well, I'll read the Haftorah with the blessings. It could be in a situation, for whatever reason, that you have 10 people, you have a minyan, you just don't have a Torah. But a Chumash you have, so maybe I could just read the Haftorah with the blessings. You have to remember the Haftorah was initiated at times when we couldn't read the Torah. There were certain times in our history when the I'm not sure if it was the Romans or the Greeks that didn't allow them to read the Torah, so they read the Haftorah as a place, but they kept that custom afterwards. So he says, we do not read the Haftarah with the bracha, ela la'achar shekar b'torah brachas, kol hakrim haruim. Everyone was called up. Now, you don't have to have the additions, like we said that there's the concept you could have additions outside of the 7 required aliyahs, let's say on Shabbos or Yom Tov 5, but only after you call up the 5 or the 7 or the 6 if it's Yom Kippur. Let's say in a regular week, you find something that disqualifies the Torah. It's psul. Even in the 7th reading, and you didn't have a replacement Torah. You couldn't make the after blessing. Even if you're doing a maftir on an obligatory maftir, meaning to say it's not the haftarah, you're rereading the last few verses of Shvi, but you're reading, let's say, Rosh Chodesh or Shabbos Shabbos Zachar or Para or Chanukah, etc. So even if there's an obligation in the maftir, I feel a nimtza b'maftir azai ein mevarchim berachas haftarah, and if there's a mistake, this disqualifies the Torah, and you can't continue reading the haftarah. Then, so again, we read this before. If you find a mistake after you've completed the 7th reading, and you only find it for whatever reason, not going to go in how, but the disqualification happens in Maftir on a regular Shabbos. So you had 7 people called up, 7 people made the before blessing and after blessing. For whatever reason, the Torah got disqualified in the Maftir reading on a regular Shabbos, then you can make the brachas of Haftarah. But if it happened in the 7th Aliyah on a regular Shabbos, or it happened in the Maftir on an obligatory Shabbos, where you're reading something, not the reread of the last few verses, but a special reading for the day, like I said, Chanukah, Rosh Chodesh, etc. So then you would not make the brachas on the Haftarah as mevarchim. I feel nimtzah mafta as I aim mevarchim brachas Haftarah. We do not make the bracha on the Haftarah. We do say it without the blessing. Shabbos pshuta, like I said, if it's a regular Shabbos, if after you've called up 7 people and you've made the before and after blessing, nimtza psul, you find only then the disqualification. Again, we don't have megala milsam lafreya. We don't have the concept by reading that, simply put, it's highly unlikely for there to have been in the few minutes between the end of the 7th reading and the repeat of the maftir of a regular week to have a psul, to have something disqualified. Obviously, you didn't catch it the first time. That's why you only noticed it the second time. It would take extreme circumstances for the Torah to have become disqualified, actually, in between the 7th and the final reading. So what happened? You just didn't notice it in the 7th reading. But we already said that just because you know something now, right? If you find the disqualification in the Torah at the end of the Torah, it's most likely that it's been like that for the entire year since the last time you read it. Let's say, I don't know, whatever happened. It's very unlikely that things just happen. Sometimes the paint will peel, but it's likely that there's been a while for that happened. So does that mean that we disqualify retroactively all the times you read, right? Maybe all those times you weren't proper reading because the Torah wasn't kosher. Doesn't work like that. Even in the actual reading itself, You've read 7 times, you find a mistake on the Maftir, and you've made 7 blessings before and after, that's considered a reading. So hey b'maftir nira diyesh likros haftarah brachas. So he says, it seems to me that you would make the blessing on the haftarah. Let's just read the notes on this last law, and we'll stop here. Next, we're going to the difficult, very difficult laws in the next chapter, which we're all looking forward to, of fires, foods, on the blech, off the blech, what foods could be heated, reheated on Shabbos, what's considered moisture, what's considered not moisture, can you put salt, how do you make coffee, how do you make tea, all these questions that we deal with on Shabbos, that will be in chapter 80. So get excited for next week's learning. Footnote number 21 is if it's a maftir that's related to the subject of the day, as in a festival, etc. Okay. That's it. Any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Does fading count as like it fades, but it's not, you could still read it. It didn't come off. A letter wasn't erased. Is that a mistake?
Okay, the questions of Psul b'Sefer Torah, the disqualifications of a Sefer Torah has different laws that has to be examined. I don't want to go into different.
Okay, but just
in
let me
general,
ask you this, because I'm very curious. So let's say you definitely know, I don't want to get into the specific details of what made it, but a panel is disqualified. Can you just switch out the panel and pay someone to write a new panel?
You mean in the event
A
of
page of the
when you're
Torah
trying
or the
to,
Haftorah.
yeah, so we have different, they have different ways of doing it. There's different, again, I don't want to get into all the laws of Sefer Torah of how they fix the Sefer Torah, if they're able to fix the whole panel, how many mistakes there is, what's the percentage of mistakes there is. These are laws of especially unique to Sefer
But
Torah.
you got the Shmika on it, you said.
I know, but I'm saying it's not a straightforward question. How many? It all depends on how bad the Sefer Torah is, how many mistakes, how often, etc. Rebecca, you're on mute.
Yeah, hi. So we talked about how during the Torah reading, if you got to shul late, you're not supposed to daven during the Torah reading instead of listening to the laning. So is it the same with the Haftorah that you can't daven then if you got to shul late? Like Shmona Esrei, Shmona Esrei, let's say.
Okay, sorry. I'm not sure I understand the question. Say that you come to shul late, they're holding the Haftorah.
Yeah.
So the question is,
if you can daven Shmona Esrei of Shacharis while they're saying the Haftorah so that you can catch up to them.
That's a good question. So based on what we've learned in the beginning of the class, that a person should even not be saying the Haftorah in a way that they're not paying attention to the reader's Haftorah, it would assume that better to wait till after they say the Haftorah and then start trying to catch up. To hear the blessings, try to hear the blessings of the Haftorah. Now, in the case that you didn't hear the first blessings, and should you hear the after blessings, I would assume yes. You should wait until you can hear the after blessings. He's basically saying don't do things that would disrupt you. He said, first of all, talking is not allowed during the Haftarah. That's a clear law number 4. But here you're not talking about talking, you're talking about praying. But still, when you're praying, especially if you're not even praying the subject, means you're not reading the Haftarah. Even reading the Haftarah is questionable how one does it. So praying, which is not the subject at hand, definitely you're not going to be concentrating on what's being done, what's happening around you. Wait till after they read the Haftarah and then to pray.
Okay, thank you.
What I would about this basic question of coming late to shul, and I can't say this with full authority. Where if a person knows they're going to come late to shul, is it better to daven parts of the davening at home, so you don't come so out of touch with the shul? I would assume so. Depending on how late you come. You know, if you're going to come to shul when they're holding the kiddush, and you just want to come, what do they call it, JFK? Just come for the kiddush, and so you want to daven at home so you could be able to just schmooze at the kiddush. That's maybe something else. There's a concept of davening in a shul, even if there's no minyan. To daven in Beis HaKnesses, it's a place of davening. Aaron, hold on. As a place of davening, as opposed to davening at home. But if you're doing it in a way so to be able to slide in to where the minyan's holding, as opposed to being caught up, there is a concept of maybe getting ahead of, if you know you're going to come, if you know for whatever reason you can't come to shul till 10, and by the time you come to shul at 10 o'clock, the minyan's holding Yishtabach, So it's nothing's wrong with holding yishtabach when you come to shul. Obviously, this you don't do too much hefsek, and there's questions of talking and all that. But there's a lot of people do come to shul before yishtabach, and they're already holding yishtabach. So there's that math is allowed to be taken into account.
Here, I mean, like maybe it's different in a Chabad shul, but in the kind of shuls I go to, by 10 o'clock, they're like finished with chakras already.
No, I know. I'm not talking about the specific times. I'm talking about like if you know you come late to shul, is it better to come and do the whole davening in shul? There's merit to that because the Beis HaKnesses is the place to daven. Even if you're not davening with the minyan, let's say for whatever reason you can't daven with the minyan, or the minyan's at a certain time you can't make it, but you could go to shul to daven Ma'ariv or Mincha. And you say, what's the difference? There's no minyan. I might as well daven at home. There is a ki beisi beis tefillah l'chol ha'amim. This is the place of my prayer. It's a place of prayer. It's a place designated for prayer. Of course, when you can, you do it with a minyan. So there is the times that you could ask yourself, is it better to daven the whole davening in the shul, or to daven a little bit at home and catch so I could daven with the minyan. So all these things have to be weighed, but to daven the whole thing at home so you could just eat the kiddush, that's different than davening in the shul.
But I mean, like one possible reason why I might, let's say I don't always go to shul, but I go the Shabbos of Rosh Chodesh benching because I want to be there for Rosh Chodesh benching. But
Yeah?
so I go for that, but like, I'm still like I didn't really daven yet, so I still need to daven in order to like catch up to them for Musaf.
Okay,
So
yeah. So again, all these things, I don't want to say with authority that absolutely daven at home, the Shachris, Shemona Esrei, Krishma, and then just come in for the Rosh Chodesh benching so you could be with the Chazan. It's kind maybe there is a clear law that I'm not that would say that if you should do that 100% or not. I have to check or posek. But again, that's a question. I'll check to make sure I'm right about this. But my feeling is that you have to, depending on what time you're coming, when you're coming. Again, you could come to shul and do the Rosh Chodesh tefillah when the Chazan's holding there. That means if you're not in a place that you can't disrupt yourself, like after Baruch Shomer, but if you're in a place that you could daven, you could say the tefillah of the Rosh Chodesh as a separate prayer, even if you're not holding there yet.
right. Okay, thank you.
Aaron?
Okay, she brought up some good points, so I wanted to comment on that before I say what I was going to say. First, yeshivish men have told me, because sometimes I see this used to be in the past. Now I'm always there early because I want to take his Mishnayos class before Shabbat services start. But they said if you come late by a certain prayer, it's best. Well, I live in New York, so there's always hundreds of shuls. So it's best to find another shul that started later or is starting at that time so that you're not behind and you can just follow normally and not have to worry. Number two is that in the art scroll, in the back of the art scroll prayer books, even if it's only for Shabbos, gives you rules, and there's a whole section on if you come late, what to do. And number three, it's a problem with a lot of shuls, but I'll talk about my shul that I am a member of. They have a lot of problems with talking. He's always telling the Torah reader, stop, wait, we have to get it quiet. And he'll do his best to get as many people to be quiet, and sometimes it works for a while, but I want to see what your shul does to keep people quiet, if your shul's even quiet, and any suggestions you got, just that the Torah says.
There's different shows where the rabbi has to figure it out on a situation basis, and there's a lot of things there's the basic, of course, do not speak during shul, do not be disruptive during shul. It's a big avera. It's not something that's overlooked at all in halacha. At the same time, there's a lot of math that has to be done about a shul that's very aggressive about this. So some shuls will say, well, there's other shuls down the block where they're less aggressive, go daven there. Some shuls have to take into account that if they're going to have that kind of attitude, no, these people won't go to shul at all. So there's always there's a lot of things that have to be weighed, but in the strict sense of the law, one should not daven in shul, and some shuls are more strict than others. There's certain shuls that you go into that, if you talk there, they're going to ask you to leave. And you may get a phone call or a message from the rabbi or the gabbai saying you're not invited to come back. This is a shul that we take our davening seriously, and we don't talk, and we don't want anyone to talk. I daven in such shuls where people that listen, we daven. There's other shuls, there's other options where people are more lax about it. We're not, and we're a congregation of people who take davening seriously, and we don't appreciate talking in the services. Also, you can't be so OCD. Like I've said many times, people get very caught up in the shul, children noise, all that. That's regular. It's regular. So you have to also be smart. You have to be accommodating and understand that kids will make noise in shul, and to start shushing and shouting at parents or getting angry or causing fights when a parent is not, super fast in getting their child out of, and the parents at the same time also, you have a lot of times parents who will be davening the Amidah, Shemona Esrei, and their kids will start shouting or screaming, and they're going to be like, well, I'm davening the Amidah and I'm not going to move. That's also not allowed, because their davening can't come in the place of other people's davening. So there's a lot of, I've seen more than once where a person who's considerate will be middle of the Midah, when the child starts making noise, they'll stop and take the child out. So these things have to all be taken with best to ask the rabbi in the shul to understand. But if the congregation is such a congregation that's really strict about it, let's say you have an eights minyan. An eights minyan is not a time for someone to come with their children, right? Because an eights minyan is 5, 6 in the morning. Some people maybe have their kids up at 5, 6 in the morning. They figure they can take them to shul. You have to be considerate that the reason people wake up at 5, 6 in the morning is they want a quiet minyan. And so, although your child woke up early, and therefore you figured, I might as well daven while my child's up and I'm up also, you have to be considerate. The consideration has to be from all sides. Common decency and like you apply to anything else in your life let
me just say that we never hinder the kids. He talks to the adults, that even the elderly who's 70 years old and they still talk. And mostly he does it during Torah. He wants Torah to be quiet. And he says, talking between the aliyahs, don't talk now, we're reading.
Yes, I'm saying, so different rabbis have to know their congregation.
He used to come to me personally, because I used to be a talker until now. And now I'm pretty much quiet. But every once in a while, I fail. But, because you got your friends there. Even we're talking Torah sometimes. What does this mean? What does that mean?
Listen, I was once in synagogue, and I wasn't being talkative I was just minding my own business, and I was actually criticized by another congregant saying I'm antisocial, but I was just trying to keep to myself. So everyone takes it different ways. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Laila Tov, thank you very much for joining. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.